this presentation may be a great one to show them, because I don't think human resources departments understand what the major airlines are really even offering or marketing to our pilots in our industry.
First of all, I want to play you a little video, so stand by. Welcome to another Aero Marine free webinar. Let me tell you who we are. We help people who are buying aircraft, vessels, and vehicles to legally avoid the California tax. Just because you're a non-resident of California doesn't mean you're not subject to their assessment. So be smart about all of that. We do these for you because we're trying to give you free information. We do this all the time because you need it, because you've asked for it. And if you've got any subjects that you'd like us to cover that you haven't heard us cover in the past, just send me an email or send an email to Kelsey or call us at 916-691-9192 and we'll get you the information that you asked for. So now here's Amanda, and she will introduce herself to you and start her presentation. Amanda, you got it.
Well, hi, first off, good morning to everybody that's listening in to our webinar this morning. And thank you to Thomas for allowing me to go ahead and present on behalf of this organization. We're going to talk today about the pilot shortage, our challenges and potential solutions in our industry. This is something that's near and dear to a lot of many folks in our industry right now. They're really struggling with this concept. So hopefully I can give you some ideas about maybe what some of the industry is doing to try to combat this. Give you a little education about where these pilots are going and where they're headed and what they've got their sights on, and some questions about, answer some questions about where we're going to be down the road in the future. My name's Amanda.
Amanda, let me interrupt you for a second because I forgot to do one thing. Sure, if you have any questions, send them in via text and we'll make sure that those get right to Amanda. Don't wait for the end of this presentation. Ask the questions while they're fresh in your mind. And I apologize for interrupting you, Amanda. That's my fault.
No problem. My name's Amanda Ferraro. I am the CEO of Aviation Safety Solutions. My business conducts lead ISBAO audits for many large Fortune company flight departments, 135 charter organizations that are involved in the ISBAO program. If you're not familiar with ISBAO, it's administered by IBAC. And IBAC helps carry out ICAO's mission, ICAO being I describe as the World FAA agency. ISBAO helps operators come in compliance with Annex 19, which is SMS requirements, as well as Annex 6 Part 2, which is how we fly airplanes around the world. A little bit of my background is I'm a Gulfstream G550, G450 international captain. I currently work with clients in the industry to provide them contract services, so I still am actively flying in the industry as a pilot. And I worked with John Deere Global Aviation Services as a pilot back quite a few years ago, but I was with them for 6.5 years. And then I was recruited by American Family Insurance to onboard a Gulfstream 450 into the flight department. And then about 2 years ago, I went out onto my own and I operate my own business. And I've been a lead auditor for our industry for the last 6 years. So I get to work with many organizations. I just love the interaction with those individuals and educating them. And I'm hoping that down the road that we can continue these webinars and you guys can get educated. That's what this is all about. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let's talk about what we're going to have on the agenda today. So we're going to discuss what's causing the pilot shortage, our barriers to entry, training the next generation. Where is the shortage at? Because actually when we look around the industry, there's going to be some very specific spots where our shortage is located right now as far as the level at which the pilots are at. Is aviation safety at risk? We're going to discuss that. We're going to talk about pay and benefits comparisons for business aviation versus the major airlines. And how is our industry attracting talent? And as Thomas said, if there's questions, please feel free to go ahead and send a message. I love to answer those questions, especially as they come up. So don't hesitate. I'm sure if you have that question, there's quite a few others that have that same question. So the first thing that we're going to cover is what is causing this pilot shortage. One of the things that we need to look at is, how many pilots are retiring? And from a statistical standpoint, where's going to be our 10-year outlook? So if we take a look at 2019, right now, from a retirement standpoint, we're running about 7,000 pilot retirements a year. And this is what I really want you to pay attention to is the next 10 years. So in 10 years from now, 2029, look at how this graph spikes drastically. I mean, we are 27,000 pilots in retirements a year in the next 10 years, guys. This is astronomical in size and scope. I mean, we've not seen anything like this before in our industry. So this graph here is going to represent the first start of our first problem, which is the retirements that are outgoing in our industry. There's been some things that have caused this shortage along the way. This is not just due to natural means. As you remember, we had 9/11, and during that time frame, a lot of pilots weren't coming into our industry. It was an industry that suffered drastically from those terrorist attacks. It was not glamorous anymore to be a pilot and to be in aviation at that time. So there was a large downturn. We had airlines furloughing pilots. We had business aviation that eventually grew out of that, but business aviation still took a downturn at that time. In 2009, they changed the mandatory retirement age from 60 to 65. And as you can only imagine, that graph that we just saw, this is one of the biggest reasons why we're seeing so many accelerated retirements now at this point. Those individuals that were going to retire are now going to be retiring in the next 10 years from that hold off. And then in 2013, we all remember the Colgan air crash. What that spearheaded was regional airline first officer requirements increased. And instead of 250 hours, we now have to have a pilot with 1,500 hours and an ATP license, ATP certificate. So that holding off of retirements and people not coming into our industry and having additional hours, not just 500 hours, but we're talking 1,500 hours. That's 6 times what they were required to have prior to. Also, captains must have logged a minimum of 1,000 hours as a co-pilot. So all these things are really have come to a point where we're at today. If you look at the barriers to entry, things that have changed in the last 20 years. I went to flight school almost it's about 15, 20 years ago at this point, which is crazy. But my flight training costs were not nearly as close to what the flight training costs are for pilots coming into our industry today. The flight training costs, if you start looking at room and board and tuition and the cost to actually rent the airplanes and a flight instructor at a university level, they're in excess of $250,000. And at many of the university level schools. So students they're finding alternate means to try to do this. Give me 1 second. I have a little cold this morning, guys, so just bear with me here. The flight training costs at the university level, when you're talking a debt level of $250,000, $300,000, that really scares a lot of students off. I mean, they can't afford that. That's a mortgage on a home, especially when you talk about what their pay is going to be in the very beginning of their career, and how long it's going to take them to build that 1,500 hours of time just to get to the regional airline level. one of the things that many people don't know in our industry, and something that I want to make sure that we understand, is you have to have a bachelor's degree to get to the major airlines. Unless you're pretty much the spaceship commander, and without a 4-year degree, the possibility to get hired at a major airline doesn't exist at this time. There are some airlines that will hand select several individuals, but for the most part right now, you are required to have a bachelor's degree of some kind. And a lot of our top tier flight departments as well in our industry require that bachelor's degree. This is an interesting one because a bachelor's degree is not necessarily flight time or experience, it's just education. So this is an area in which I've been seeing some of our leaders in the industry re-looking at their requirements for pilots to help bring other pilots that may not have a bachelor's degree. Maybe they have an associate's degree, and they're willing to accept that, but keep the same amount of flight time requirements to bring those individuals in. I just had a question. What's the best way to get the 1,500 hours? There's multiple ways, and with this industry being so progressive right now and opportunities available, first off, being a flight instructor, getting your flight ratings and becoming a flight instructor and logging that time, the flight schools are hurting right now. They are losing flight instructors left and right to the airlines because of the shortage. You can probably walk into your local airport and find who does flight training in that area, and they're probably looking for flight instructors. Because the flight instructors, we're just not able to keep them in our industry right now. When they hit that 1,500 hour mark, they are gone. They are, or even less if they may go into business aviation as well. I had a very good friend of mine. She went into the right seat of a Hawker jet at about 800 hours of total flight time. So very different from when I came into the industry and I needed 2,500 hours, 3,000 hours to get into my first jet aircraft. Also, let me just say a couple other things about that 1,500 hours. There's other ways to do that. So if you're looking for, if you're in an area that does banner towing or, the skydivers, you can build time that way. There's some mapping agencies out there that do GPS, like photo geographical mapping of the United States. That's another great way. But there are some operators out there that are willing to allow somebody to fly along, get the experience in a smaller aircraft, like a Pilatus or a King Air, and like a King Air 90. And that's a great way to build flight time as well. You just need to seek out those individuals and ask them if they're available to do so. Also, 135 operations, as I mentioned, my friend, she was brought into the Hawker and into the right seat at about 800 hours of time to build time, and she's doing a great job. So, and what I'm finding is a lot of our 135 operators are struggling with trying to find pilots and bring those pilots in. So, networking is huge. It's one of the biggest things that we can do in our industry is to get to know people, get to know the operators at our airport and around us. And, that face-to-face time it's so valuable. Okay, so question, is there a chance that Congress may change the rules and lower the requirements if they are made aware of the upcoming shortage? Okay. So this has been something that's being talked about right now. I don't believe that they're looking in that direction at this time that I'm aware of. I've not seen anything come through. They changed the rules because of an accident that killed many people. And, before, to go to the airlines, you only had to have 250 hours of time. And they've become more strict about requirements. And I don't see them changing that. Usually they don't make that recommendation, go through with that, and then change that back. I do think there's going to be some other things that are coming down the road that that's going to help with the shortage and that they're seeing. And we'll talk about those things here in the webinar. So once you kind of take a look here, this came from Boeing. This is a map, a pilot outlook map for the next 20 years of the demand that we're going to need. And first off, I want you to notice our world demand, 790,000 pilots are going to be required in the next 20 years. I want you to really pay particular close attention. The Asia area, Pacific area, is going to actually have a need for more pilots than the United States, which is really mind-blowing when you talk about the progression of what's to come. The United States, we're looking at 206,000 pilots. But when you look at that Asia Pacific area, that's a huge chunk of growth in the next 20 years. So where in the world is the pilot shortage? We've got air travel growth it's grown by about 4.8% each year. In the next 20 years, we're projected to grow 5% each year. So that increase is coming, kind of coming full circle in a lot of ways, because what's happening is not only we have a shortage of pilots coming in from all those factors that happened in the beginning, now we have a lot of people traveling and the demand is there. We're estimating that we need 19,000 pilots each year through 2016, but we only train about 12,000 a year. So when you talk about who's going to be affected by this could be astronomical in scope, especially as you see the pilots retiring out of the airlines and pilots retiring out of our industry. That estimate is going to go up as time goes on. And it's funny because what we get to talk about in audit is a lot of stuff going on in our industry. What I see is everybody is having the same issue with finding qualified, well-experienced pilots to staff their organization. And the movement of that is actually impacting a lot of different things. Because let's face it, when we lose somebody in our organization, we lose the experience, we lose the person that has, a lot of impact in our organization. We typically have training costs associated with bringing a new person in and the time for HR interviews and interviewing with the team. So when we lose an individual in our organization due to them moving in the industry, it can be very hurtful to our organizations. It's something we're going to talk about, and how do we not make it so painful? So I just want to make sure that I'm really clear about this pilot shortage. It's a major issue, you guys. It is something. I hear some organizations tell me, oh, it's just a downturn, Amanda. No, it's not a downturn. I want to make sure that we're very clear about this is not a downturn, or this is not an upswing, or it's not something that's just going to come and go with our financial status of our country. This is something that is a major issue, and it should not be ignored by organizations. So if you are one of those organizations, or a flight department, or a 135 operator, or an aircraft owner, it should not be ignored. You should start taking a look at how you bring pilots into your organization, what means you bring pilots into your organization, how you do marketing, where your pay, salary, and structure is. How can you offer things that are different and competitive that would offset to the industry? You may not be able to pay them airline wages, and we're going to look at what those are. But what else could you be doing? Pilot disability insurance, and what other offerings could you do? When I was at one of my organizations, we started doing our own pilot scheduling. The team started to do the scheduling, as far as we could put ourselves on the schedule as pilots. How awesome is that? So, being creative, I think that's one of the biggest things. Our pilot shortage is not just for pilots. It's an industry shortage. It's an industry shortage in all the supporting occupational roles when it comes to aviation. This includes maintenance, includes flight attendants, it includes all the other supportive admin type roles. This is not just pilots, and I want you to make sure that you keep that in the back of your mind as we move forward, because I think this is going to impact a lot of decisions that are going to be happening in our industry about, don't just focus on the pilots. Now, you need pilots to fly your airplane, of course, but your supporting roles are moving as well in the industry. So how do we bring pilots and how are we going to train the next generation? How do we bring them into aviation? What are their pipelines? Let's just quickly take a look at some of the largest employers of pilots, kind of get an idea of what's going on as far as the training aspect is concerned. So the top 10 aviation schools in the United States, the first one being Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, trains about 6.8% of all of our pilots in the industry, followed by the Air Force. But what I want you to take away from this is notice that the top 10, Community College of the Air Force, 0.9%, University of North Dakota, 0.9% of the pilots. So you have to ask yourself, well, where are all these other pilots coming from? If they're not coming out of, Embry-Riddle or UND or some of these major universities, where they're coming from is local airport FBO training or some of your smaller home organizations that are local to your airport. I have a question here. It says, of the 12,000 trained, is that to the commercial instrument or higher ratings? Those are, okay, so of the 12,000 that are trained, so that's a commercial instrument. That is correct. I think I got that question. I'm misunderstanding your question, I think, but I'm going to try to answer it as best as I can. So of the 12,000, they're looking at commercial instrument or higher certificates. That's correct. This is not just private pilot that we're looking at, these statistics, by the way. This is all commercial rated pilots. So there's quite a few more private pilots out there. What type of social media do you use to show what pilots are doing? I need more clarification on that question. What type of social media do you use to show what pilots are doing? Kelsey, can you give me some more clarification on that question? So one of the things I want you to take away from this statistical graph here is most of our pilots are coming from our local airport type training programs, and they may be getting a bachelor's degree in something else other than aviation. It's not at a major aviation school. These total percentages make up about 10% of all of our pilots that are coming into the industry. So this should give you an idea of where pilots are located, right? They're located at our home airports. They're training with our local flight schools. That's where the young pilots are right now. Most of them are not at the university level, and if they are at the university level, they have a lot of flow-through programs that the universities use to the airlines. They have a lot of agreements that are made. If we look at the top 10 U.S. employers, the United States Air Force comes in at the top. They got 23,000, or they need 23,000 total pilots. They actually have a shortage right now of about 2,000 pilots, and then followed by the U.S. Army and then Delta Airlines. And you can see all the major airlines are listed up there. So question, who does not have a pilot shortage right now? And I asked this question to people and they're like, I don't know, everybody does. Well, the fact is, guys, the major airlines, they don't have a pilot shortage right now. Why? Because everyone wants to go to the major airlines. When I was at FedEx last year for 4 months, and they have 10,000 pilots in their interview queue right now because all these pilots want to go to the airlines. They want to go to the majors. And the question you have to ask yourself is, why? And how is it that they've become such an attractive place for pilots to go? Well, let's take a look at that. Let's find out why and how that is, and how did they position themselves to be one of the most sought after places to be for pilots that are coming into our industry. Well, if you don't know it by now, I'm going to let you know a little secret. Pilots like money, guys. I hate to say it like that, but it's the god awful truth. And pay is huge. When a pilot starts looking at what they can make over a lifetime, over a year, they start looking at pay. And there's some things I'm going to show you for when it comes to pay. It's not just base pay. There's a whole lot of other pay out there that you need to be aware of when it comes to some of these major airlines. The benefits are undeniable. The 401k, pension, medical, dental, vision, flight benefits. I was told while I was going through my hiring process at FedEx, I was told that my retirement will have $8 million in it by the time I retire, which is a pretty amazing number if that actually comes to be true. And that was at several. I was actually offered a position at UPS as well, and was told the same thing at UPS, that my retirement would be well into the 8 million or above range. The medical, dental, vision, and flight benefits is another huge force for the pilot shortage. The scheduling opportunity to know the schedule ahead of time and having to, the ability to bid your own schedule. I think that's huge. They can adjust and move and be flexible, and I can't take this trip, so I'm going to drop this trip, but I'm wondering if somebody can pick this trip up if I drop it. And so that was that schedule piece is a huge component. And so, as an organization, should be an area that you guys could look at. Could you do something with that schedule? Is there something that you can modify or be creative with how to schedule your pilots, whether it's days off, whether it's weekends, whether it's, really looking at that quality of life for those pilots. Seniority, there's another one. Pilots know when they go to the major airlines, they start out at the very low end of the totem pole and they end up at the top portion at some point. And what that means for a pilot is they don't have to fly as much, or they get their best schedules. They get to pick anything, they get the pick of any schedules that they want. Question, is that something you guys can do in your home organization? Could you mimic something like that? Could you bring some of this stuff to the table that would mimic, why the pilots are chasing the major airlines? And then growth and opportunity. I was offered, a lot of positions inside the organization at FedEx when I got done with training to help them with their drone program and to help them with their safety program. The promise of leadership and growth and opportunity, and you can come off the line and fly. You can come off the line and do projects and then go back to the line and fly. And it's very attractive for those individuals that are seeking a leadership role. So there was a clarification here on the question. Okay, so the clarification is if you graduate from an FAA approved university, 1,500-hour requirement is lowered. Is that true? Yeah, that is true. It's lowered, I believe, to 1,200 hours. Still quite a few hours that you have to do, but yes, it is lowered. But it's still quite a bit. It's not that 250 hours that we had 20 years ago. I went to Atlantic Coast Airlines in the very beginning of my career, and I think I had just about 250 hours, if I remember, when I started my internship. I did their bridge pilot internship program there. So what type of pilot is the airlines recruiting? Okay, this one, guys, is really important. They're not just looking for any pilot. They are looking for your leadership pilots. And what you need to know is they are seeking out, they're typically not seeking out like a director level, because the directors are most of them are getting ready to exit our industry here in the next 10 years. But they are seeking out that next level of pilot. And on all the pilot applications out there, they're looking for individuals that have chief pilot, standardization, captain type status, safety officers and safety managers, and people that have had a leadership role in the organization. I think this is a really important thing to note, because I think down the road in the next 10 years, what we're going to see is we're going to see a big, huge hole in our leadership and business aviation. And this is important. A lot of the interview is centric around leadership and what you've done as a leader in your own organizations, your initiative, awards that you've received. volunteer time that you've done. So this is a really important piece to concentrate on. Is it's not your new incoming pilot that they're looking to hire. It's the one that's been there the longest and has the most experience and has the most opportunities, and especially the age. There's kind of a typical age range, and if you look at some of the airline graphs, that age range spans from about age 30 to about age 47-ish. Now, plus or minus, they'll hire, individuals into their 50s. But when you look at that age range between 30 and 47, they are taking our pilots in that age range, as well as in the status of leadership type roles. So this is a comparison here of the 2013 survey results from ProPilot. And I just use this as an example. Guys, there's a lot of pilot surveys out there that you can use. NBAA, there's like, I don't even know, there's probably 7 or 8 different surveys that you guys can use to derive, your salary surveys. But I just want to show this for purposes of, kind of where our industry is at, where it was, where we're at, and then we're going to talk about where the major airlines are at. So if you notice down here, I just use this Gulfstream G650 as an example. In 2013, our average in the industry was 148,000. And in 2018, our average jumped up 162,000. So it's a little bit more than, shy of 15,000 a year increase in salary. Notice the low end here, 113,000 versus 126. But notice the top end, 204 in 2018 to 195. So this number didn't jump all that much on the top end. So what is this? Well, usually your high time guys are going to be those individuals that have been at your organization the longest, right? Those are going to be your captains that have the most experience. They're your international captains. They're your mentor pilots. They're the ones that you trust to go halfway across the world and you don't worry about them at all. You don't even think about it. So let's talk about what the major airlines are doing. And I use FedEx as an example because I was there and I can validate this. It's funny. I've had some individuals come up to me and say, hey, man, those pay scales online, they're not real. Yeah, they are real, guys. These are confirmed. This is their pay scales. It's published. It's published with the union contract. And a 15-year captain, I'm just going to give you an example. A 15-year captain on a 777 makes $313 an hour. So the pilots are guaranteed 75-hour minimum. That's $12,475 a month. And then that equates to $281,700 a year. So, okay, so this is kind of staggering, right? Because our most experienced Gulfstream captains are going to places like FedEx. And this is just the base pay, though, guys. This has nothing to do with any of the other pay that they offer. And I'm going to show you, some of the other pay that the airlines are offering at this point. But this is just their annual base pay with nothing else. And that doesn't include all their other benefits as well. So right now, FedEx is advertising to our industry that, and it's true, I've actually had a very good friend of mine, in 18 months, he upgraded on the 757 as a captain. And they have an 18-month upgrade time. So what this means is, they can be at an organization for 18 months, upgrade to the captain on the 757, and then their years of service is going to be when they started with the company. So you may, as you go up this pay scale, these pay scales are published and the pilots know that. And becomes very attractive. But then they have all this other stuff, which is going to be other incentive pay. Well, what is this? See, FedEx and the major airlines have this figured out. They know that pilots like to be paid. So they have things like reassignment pay, base pay for standby trips, special project pay. So when you're pulled off of pulled off the flight line, you come in and you do special projects, they pay you for that. They pay you for disruptions in your schedule. So anytime they have a disruption or they need to change airports or they need to send you somewhere else that you weren't initially planning on going, they're going to pay you for it. They're going to pay pilots to come in and taxi their airplanes for maintenance. They're going to pay you if you've had an extended duty day. They're going to pay you for an extra duty day. They're going to pay you if they have to recall you from rest. They're going to pay you to do your computer training online courses every single month that you're required to do by the company. They're going to pay you for your initial, your upgrade, and your recurrent pay. They're going to pay per diem. And some airlines are offering yearly bonuses, sign-on bonuses, and retiree health insurance. So when you add up all those pay items in addition to your annual base salary, some of the captains that have figured schedules out are living a pretty awesome quality of life at about $350,000 or more a year, which includes all those pay items. So that is something to seriously consider. You know, that is the one thing that pilots will look at is, what are you paying? What's your pay scale? And, you know, if you don't have that figured out, that's a little worrisome, right? If you're having a hard, difficult time trying to convince your HR that we need to up our salaries, this presentation may be a great one to show them, because I don't think human resources departments understand what the major airlines are really even offering or marketing to our pilots in our industry. So that's just the pay portion. Let's go ahead and talk about what are the benefits that they're offering. So for FedEx, they offer $500 into a 401k that FedEx pays. And then they have an AB fund, which means that the company sets aside 8% of your pilot income into this AB fund, and that doesn't come out of the pilot's check. It comes, so that's a huge consideration. When most of the organizations that, you know, corporate Fortune company flight departments are offering a 3% match, this 10% total, the company is doing that for the pilot automatically without the pilot even putting any money into the fund to begin with. They have 4 to 5 different health insurance options. You know, you can pick from those health insurance options: dental, vision, long-term disability, short-term disability. They have outstanding vacation policies. They have jump seat privileges on their aircraft. And they also offer trip protection for commuting pilots on company aircraft. And they also have the support of the ALPA union. One of the things that I'll tell you is the trip protection is they try to make it very attractive to pilots that are commuting on company aircraft to not penalize them if that company airplane diverts to another airport or something happens. They actually protect you from a flying standpoint. If you're trying to get to work, you'll be protected. So when you look at some of this, you know, I'm hoping those of you that are listening in are starting to kind of get your wheels turning a little bit about how to, you know, what kind of things could you be matching, or what kind of things could you be doing as an organization to try to make yourselves stand out and make yourselves attractive to our industry. So the industry, as far as commercial aviation, so this is the major airlines, higher salaries, they're offering outstanding retirement, excellent benefits. The salary growth and the scales are published for the pilots to see. They know at what point, at what year are they going to be at this level. It's not a, you know, when somebody retires, we'll move you up. It's a, look, when you hit this level in your career, this is what you're getting. They offer tuition reimbursement, college. They're doing college recruiting events, and some of the regional airlines are offering sign-on bonuses, and a couple of the major airlines are offering the profit sharing. FedEx is one of the only airlines that offers no furlough protection. So they actually will reduce all their pilots' pay, but they won't furlough their pilots. So they offer. They're trying to offer stability, which is an interesting concept to pilots. But now that you kind of know what they're offering, you know, hopefully you can start having those conversations in your home organization. So what is our industry doing to attract and retain? Well, we've had a bump in salaries that we've seen, but guys, it's not enough. I'm telling you, I just had a phone call today from a very good friend of mine, a director of a very large flight department. Chief pilot left over the weekend. So they're scrambling today. And, that 3 to 4%, when HR tries to pacify the pilot, they know that the pay, the benefits, the schedule, it seems to be so much more attractive on the other side. So what are we doing? We've got scholarship offerings. NBAA has started the Young Professionals group, and our local BAA groups around the industry are starting to talk about this. We have some organizations establishing internship programs with local flight schools, colleges, flight departments. One of the things I want to talk with you about is we're going to have a big hole in leadership in our industry. Experience and leadership is going out the door very rapidly. And one of the items that we did in our home organization was we developed a leadership development program within our flight department. And we broke our department into leadership roles. So we had a training officer, a safety officer, a security officer, a standardization officer, and those individuals got mentored, and they sat in those roles for a period of time, and we developed them into, we allowed them to do that role in the organization, and then we switched those roles around. And what that allowed for is the opportunity for one, when a pilot leaves the flight department, it allows for the other individuals in our industry to be able to pick up the pieces when somebody leaves. It grows your pilots to a leadership level, because without leadership training and without mentoring, that is going to be an essential component to what we're going to be looking at in the next 10 years. We're going to have a huge hole there. So, look at your home organization. Can you do a mentoring program? And some of your pilots, guys, they just want to fly. They don't want to do office work. They don't want to develop into leadership. They don't want to do leadership training. But then you're going to have some of your pilots that are insatiable for wanting to understand and know, getting their feet wet with leadership. And, those are the pilots that are coming in. Those are the pilots that are asking to do stuff. Those are the pilots that are helping in their off times when they're not flying. Some of my organizations are doing attendance at job fairs. So we just had the local National Collegiate Flying competition here at our local airport. We had all kinds of attendance from major airlines, as well as some local charter groups as well. So I have a question here. It said, why did you opt to leave FedEx to go to business aviation? My business has partnered with a large aerospace partner, and it's going to be announced here hopefully in the next month or so. And I left FedEx to run my own business and to be the CEO of my own company, and to try to help educate our industry about safety management, as well as the ISBAO program. So for our family, it was a wonderful decision, and we're excited to move forward with this organization when they make their partnership announcement, and be really looking forward to that. So you'll be seeing that in the industry to come very soon. Military aviation, they're offering their pilots a retention bonus, and but they're still short. They need about 2,000 pilots right now, 2,000 more pilots than what they have. They need 23,000, and they're short about 2,000 right now. And they've tried to give them a retention bonus, but it still is not quite holding these pilots in the military. In fact, my sim partner was a military guy, and great individual. So one of the things that I'm going to encourage you to do is, evaluate the shortage. After kind of knowing some of this stuff about the airlines, what they're offering, what you're offering, the biggest thing that you can do is kind of look at where can you provide benefit. Could it be schedule? Could it be pay? Could it be bonuses? Could it be profit sharing? Could it be disability insurance? Could it be, retiree insurance? One of the biggest things that you need to think about, and those chief pilots and directors that are listening in on this conversation, and aircraft owners, how much does it cost to retain a pilot with the same level of experience? Well, if your pilot leaves to go to the major airlines, let's say your chief pilot just left you, what type of experience does that pilot need in order to bring the same individual with the same amount of experience and training into your organization? How much is that going to cost you? And usually the answer is a lot, and sometimes into the millions. So it's the cost to retrain a pilot or a younger pilot coming into our industry to the level in which our chief pilot just left is going to cost you a lot of money. And those organizations that are struggling with keeping pilots really need to start looking at their pay, really need to start looking at their benefits, looking at, the mentoring opportunities, looking at opportunities for partnerships, flow through program type things. As you're published, do you publish your pay scales? I think that's a big one. A lot of pilots are afraid to apply for business aviation positions because there is no promise of pay. It ranges so far on a scale. Is that something that you could think about doing? The airlines publish their pay scales. Why can't we? Do you have a promise of growth for those pilots? Or are you just coming to be a pilot? We want you to do some admin stuff, but do you have something established? Do you have a leadership program? Do you have a mentoring program? What are those things that you're offering that pilot? What is your visibility to your potential future pilots? This one, a lot of times when we're in business aviation, and I've been in business aviation almost my whole entire career, we're very centric to the airport, and we kind of stay in our own organization at the airport. Start getting out. Start going to your local flight schools. Start introducing yourself to the local university programs. Start looking at potential internship programs and doing something, or a mentoring opportunity, or bringing some of those young pilots into your organization for a day. You could even do like a picnic day. It doesn't have to be anything big, but at least to let them know that you guys exist. That visibility is huge. Try to figure out where those pilots are at. Well, we know that they're probably not at Embry-Riddle, so they're probably closer to your home organization than you think. The NBA conferences, there's an NBA Young Professionals group. That's another great networking opportunity for your flight department. So what's the future? So this is my opinion, and I think as I've seen the shortage, we're on the very beginning cusp of this shortage. I get this question, and a lot of people say, what will happen? What's going to happen to these small organizations and departments that refuse to address the pilot shortage? Well, there's going to be a couple things that I believe, in my opinion, that's going to happen here. One, these departments are going to either cease to exist down the road, and I'm talking 10 years down the road, because they're not going to be able to find qualified pilots and candidates to staff their aircraft, or they're going to have to use alternate means to try to staff their airplanes with experience, meaning the organizations, instead of having their own flight department, are going to be looking more at staffing companies. They're going to be doing things that are going to be outside of what we do now, maybe doing pilot share type activities. If you have a pilot that only flies 150 hours a year, and you can find another partner to match, maybe that partner, they fly 200 hours a year with the same type of airplane. Could you share that pilot? I think some of those things that are going to get ready to innovate in our industry are going to happen, and they're going to happen because there's going to be such a need for that. From a safety standpoint, kind of scary, guys. I mean, I have a client, they have, back 10 years ago, they had over 1,000 applications for one position. This year, they had 20 applications for that position. And this is a renowned flight department. This is a Fortune 50 company. Of those 20 applications that they received, only 2 of those applications actually met the minimum requirements. That's scary. That's unbelievable. And I know this is ringing a bell for some of you. In that's listening to this. We have pilots that are applying at 400 hours a time to get into international Global Express and Gulfstream airplanes. But at some point, we need to get them the level of experience to be where they'll be safe. I point to 2 accidents in our industry, one for safety reasons and 2 for leadership. The first one, as you remember, there was a Learjet accident out in Teterboro in 2007. And if you're familiar with that accident, that second in command that was flying that airplane was an SIC 0. And what that means is that pilot was not actually qualified to fly the airplane. That person was supposed to be doing co-pilot duties only. And that pilot was actually, at the time of the accident, was flying the aircraft. And you can look that up on the NTSB website. But one of the takeaways about this particular accident is, why do we have to hire somebody with SIC 0 qualifications? Why is it that an SIC 0 was allowed in the aircraft? And I think this is characteristic, and we need to be careful, because we've had a lot of organizations asked to lower their minimums significantly to just bring a pilot into their organization so they can just fill a seat. We need to be really careful about not just filling the seat. We need to, work with our corporate department to make sure, and our owners to make sure that they're well educated about pilot experience in some respects equals safety of our passengers and our people. Because at the end of the day, unfortunately, we kill people. And when we have somebody qualified as an SIC 0 that should not be flying our airplane, we should be asking ourselves, is there something else we should be doing so that we're not compromising the safety of our passengers? Because at the end of the day, what it's going to come down to is safety. Is we have all these SIC 0s flying around in our airplanes. We've really essentially lost one of our flying pilots in the cockpit, and that's not safe at all. And leadership. I'm going to point to the Gulfstream Bedford accident in 2004. And if you remember, that accident was consistent with the Gulfstream taking off with the control lock engaged. And it was found through their flight data recorder later on that the pilots had not done a control check in quite a few rotations. I think it was like 170 some rotations out of a total of 175. So it was a very small percentage of times in which they actually did a control check and followed the checklist. I think with this, leadership oversight is going to be huge, and we need to really take a look at that. We really need to examine where we're going to be. The Bedford accident, what could have helped with that? And I've been asked this question, and I'm going to point to flight data recording data. As our industry starts to innovate, and I believe that when we are in times of difficulty, we will as an industry innovate and come up with better solutions. And I believe that is one of them. I think innovation is going to be the key for helping this pilot shortage and how we're going to deal with this over the next 10 to 20 years. Finding advancements in safety programs, so like CFOQA and flight data monitoring. As an auditor, I can come into an organization, look at their CFOQA data, give them feedback and say, guys, do you know that you've not done a control check all year long? And that's part of your daily checklist. There's a problem going on here. Or flight data monitoring, for all of our fleet. I think that's going to be a huge component of helping our pilots, one, be better pilots, self-reflection, as well as working on training for them. Technology in the aircraft, that's another big one. I believe this is an area that Congress is thinking that this pilot shortage is going to help, is the unmanned flight. And as far as doing single pilot operations, and that's coming down the road. Boeing right now is working on an airplane that is going to be single pilot qualified with a monitoring pilot on the ground. Unmanned type flight down the road, that all those things are going to help with the pilot shortage. The pilot pool, what can you guys do? Hiring, salary, benefits, how can you market yourself? How can you better institute better retirement options for your pilots? Flight training. So there was an idea floating around in our industry that flight safety and SimuFlight are also, and our training providers are having a really difficult time with keeping their instructors. Having somebody go and spend some time with those organizations to get them the level of experience that would be similar to a 1,000-hour pilot. If you can't find a pilot that's over 1,000 or 2,000 hours, where can you plug in and maybe have a candidate go spend some time at another organization, and then bring them into your home organization? Leadership training is huge, and innovation as far as pilot sharing options. This is maybe taking one pilot and sharing it with two different operators. Those things are all going to have to be looked at and innovated. So my question to the audience today is, how are you shielding your organization against the pilot shortage? I think this is a great question to ask after this presentation. And what steps have you taken, if any, to try to shield your organization against what I believe is going to be an epic issue in our industry? And with that, I thank you so much. Here's my contact information. You can visit my website, www.avsafetysolutions.com, and my email, amanda@avsafetysolutions.com. I'm always available by phone. If you have questions after this or you need to discuss where you are, I'm always more than willing to pick up the phone and answer any questions that I can. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Amanda, for this great presentation. And I have a challenge for all of you who are watching this webinar. What are you going to do about helping in this pilot shortage problem? Because it's a massive problem, and we all have some responsibility to help fix it. Even if you're just encouraging people, young people, to learn how to fly, get more people interested into aviation. And secondarily, as a company, make sure that you quality control everything to the safety standards that you would apply if you and your family were going to be on that airplane. I think those two steps would be, they're clearly something we all can do, but you should do it. Lastly, I encourage you to call Amanda. Her phone number is on the screen, and acknowledge her for putting together this great presentation, acknowledge her for being an experienced pilot, and acknowledge her for the great work at keeping up the standards high, because the solution isn't reduction of standards. Never, ever lower a goal. Amanda, I personally want to thank you for taking the time to do this. And anytime you want to come back and you want to do an update or just tell us about what other people are doing just to keep this issue alive and keep it in everybody's mind, just call us and stay connected with us.
I would love to, Thomas. I have a question here asking from the audience if any corporate private aircraft airframe manufacturers have pilot or technician training mentoring programs. Nothing formalized that I know of at this point. A lot of our regional airlines, as well as the majors, have established their flow-through programs, but not that I'm aware of. And that could be something that could and should be looked at, as far as what some of the airlines are doing, like a full pay. We'll pay for all of your ratings. You come fly for us for so many years and give so much of your time back. That could be an option for some of the organizations in our industry. It says, with the retirement of non-ADS-B qualified airplanes in January, is there an estimate number of pilots that will be looking for employment? Oh, that's a great question. I've not seen any statistics on that. I believe that it's not going to be much of a factor. I think there's actually not as many pilots that are going to be affected. Most of the organizations are coming compliant fairly quickly with ADS-B. So I've not seen a number on that. I've not seen any statistics on that. And I do try to scour our industry for information. It's not something that I've seen as far as a concern. So I don't know if it's really going to impact the shortage at all, unfortunately. Good news is you can find a job. So, Thomas, thank you so much for the opportunity today, and I really hope that this was beneficial for the audience.
I think they're always beneficial, but I have a challenge for everybody in the audience. Please let us know how you feel about this particular webinar. I'll pass all the information on to Amanda. And please let us know if you have any particular subjects that relate to whatever your particular industry is that you'd like to see, and nominate anybody who would be a great speaker. We're all in this together, every one of us, men and women. So I'm about ready to end this webinar if we don't have any more questions. Amanda, I don't think you have any more questions at this point.
That's correct. No more questions at this time, but I'm always available to be contacted. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for joining us. We've had a great audience, and thank you, Amanda, again.